Persons who have been kidnapped, what was your experience like? Are there things you do now that you would have never done before? This happened a while ago when I was 6. I come from a third world countries and at the time, kidnappings were at an all-time high. We lived in a fairly nice neighborhood, no kidnappings there, no theft, great neighbors. We felt pretty safe and therefore, my mom wasn't too worried. Our house was a gated residence, so we had a front yard and backyard. I was out one morning in the front yard, playing with some toys while my mom was inside working or cooking or whatever. Someone knocked on the front gate. Me being a dumb child decided to go up and ask who it was. It was this fairly old man who asked for some water. Me being the nice, helping child opened the door and was snatched immediately. I don't particularly remember what happened after that, but I woke up in a compound which I'm pretty sure was far from home. They hadn't done anything bad to me, but they did try to feed me food that I didn't like. I was a picky child and so, all I ate was fruit. They had asked for ransom, which to this day, I don't know how much it was. They just kept me in a room all day with duct tape on my mouth and ropes around my feet and hands. They did take duct tape off to let me drink water or eat food. Anyways, a few days later, the police busted them and arrested them. They ended up in jail for life is what I was told. Not too long after that, my parents decided to move to a different country, and now all is well. I still think about what might have gone wrong if they had sold me into child slavery or something, fairly common in my country. Life resumed after that. I'm as happy as a 20-year-old can be. Nothing really changed. I still don't know why I was kidnapped, maybe for ransom or whatever. In exactly a month, it'll be my 14th kidnapping anniversary. When I was 20, I was stuck at a party with a heap of drunk idiots, and fights started happening, so I wanted to go home. My phone died and I didn't have keys or my wallet on me, so I decided to walk home across town at midnight. I walked most of the way home when I came across a 30-year-old on a push bike who was chasing another man on a scooter up the road. Little did I know that he was trying to mug the other guy. I walked faster and kept my head down. The guy rode around the block on his bike. Then when he knew I was alone, he jumped off his bike and dragged me into a bush at knife point. He tried to mug me, but when he realized I had nothing on me, he decided he would rape me instead. I convinced him that we would be busted at the side of the road and he should come home with me. We walked for what seemed like 40 minutes, and he held me by the throat so I couldn't run. We got to a hill and I offered to push his bike for him as it looked heavy. I kept the bike between us. We got to the top and I saw a taxi at the bottom. I threw the bike at him and ran away screaming rape. Blisters all over my feet, but I didn't care. All you care about is escaping. He ran away and luckily they could get enough DNA evidence to catch him. He recently was sentenced to 12 years jail. I was very lucky. Never walk alone at night. When I was maybe 10 or 11, my neighbor kidnapped me. She was this single woman in her 50s who was always super nice to me. She was always on her porch, and she'd wave when I came home from school. Anyway, I was walking home from school and she was waving as usual, but this time she was beckoning me over. I went up to her porch, and she asked me if I wanted some meatloaf she made. I fucking loved meatloaf and she seemed harmless, so I said yes. I expected her to come outside with a plate or something, but instead she called me in and told me to sit downstairs. I felt weird about it, but I followed her into her basement and sat down on her couch. She brought me a plate of meatloaf and I watched Pokemon 2000 on VHS. She had a freezer with those tube popsicle things too. After I ate, I told her I needed to go home, and she told me my parents called and asked her to keep me while they ran errands. I felt weird about it and suspected she was lying, but I just kinda went along with it. I remember I asked her if I could get my Game Boy at one point from my house, and she said my parents told me not to let me out of her sight. I remember watching Men in Black and falling asleep. When I woke up, I tried leaving, but the door was locked. She left some banana pudding for me on the table for when I woke up, so I just had that and went back to sleep. She opened the door at like 5 in the morning, woke me up, and asked me if I wanted to go home. She looked like she had been crying. I told her yes, and she let me go. My parents asked me where I was and I just told them I went home with a friend after school. I didn't have a cell phone, so it was pretty normal for me to just be gone for a day. I didn't see my neighbor on her porch the next Monday, so I knocked on her door. She came outside and we talked on the porch about stuff. We never talked about that night, and she probably thought I didn't even realize what happened. She didn't say, but I think she had a kid who died a couple years prior and wanted to fill the gap. I never hated her for it or anything. Until I moved a couple years later, I would sit on her porch after school most days and she'd listen to my neat facts about space. Even though what she did was obviously not okay, I gotta commend you for not getting weirded out and instead realizing that woman needed someone around. To be honest, I was just happy for the attention. My parents were very determined to be seen as authority figures and I didn't have any friends at school. I'm sure she helped me just as much as I helped her. My father kidnapped me when I was 7, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I lived with my alcoholic mother and her insane boyfriend. I wasn't abused physically, but looking back, the mental abuse and neglect was very traumatic. Some borderline child called it things. Anyways, my father had visitation rights and picked me up every other weekend. One weekend he came to get me and saw that I had not eaten much. Food was almost always under lock and key, and my mom and her boyfriend were nowhere to be found. So my father told me, "Pack your stuff." We spent some time hiding out at different places with family, friends, even hotels in Laughlin and Vegas. It was like a mini vacation. I even remember staying at my dad's girlfriend's house when the cops showed up. I hid under the bed while they talked to her. At the end of the day, I never had to go back to my mom's boyfriend's house and my father won majority custody. I'm not sure how I would have turned out if I had stayed there. Thanks, Dad. I was a victim of parental kidnapping as a child. It was terrifying because I knew the situation was wrong and I shouldn't have been with my mother. But even when I could put together words to say that, I was scolded because, "No, that's your mother can't kidnap you." It was one of many events that made me lose all faith in authority figures. Since it happened when I was young, I don't do anything different in my life as an adult, but I do get very annoyed when people complain about having to sign out their kid from daycare and facing any sort of hurdles when taking their kid out of school or daycare early. Familial kidnapping is real and can be as traumatizing, if not more so, than stranger kidnapping. I was lucky that my mom just wanted her sympathy ticket. I had a family member going through a divorce try to pick up his kids from school. The school informed him that they had been told by his wife that he wasn't allowed to pick up the children and that there was a restraining order against him. No such restraining order existed. He had to threaten the school to produce the restraining order until finally they agreed to give him his children. Yeah, it can be really fucked up. I went to a public school and they refused to in any way prohibit my mother from getting access to me and my brother. Partially because the state also refused to give my dad a restraining order. Sigh. They refused to believe she was abusive despite tons of documentation. Eventually, my dad sent me to private school, where they would block her access, but she lied and said she was my stepmom or something after hours to try to get on campus to lie to and attempt to manipulate my teachers. I wasn't on campus at the time and didn't see her, so they didn't even know there had been a security breach. Well, one of my teachers mentioned meeting her offhand the next day and I had an anxiety attack bordering on panic attack and I was hysterical for the rest of the day. Obviously, I was taken home as soon as they were sure they didn't need to call an ambulance. After that, they circulated her picture to all of the staff and nothing ever happened again. Was that before or after you'd been kidnapped by her? After. The school issue was when I was in high school, the kidnapping. I was much younger. But it's all so vague now. For years I almost no memories from before I was 13 because I was simply too traumatized and had blocked them out. Now it's all a blur. Every summer my brother and I would fly out to Bethel Island, California. We'd stay on my mother's houseboat, the land with no rules, and endless days. I looked forward to it every year. When I was 7, my mother sued my father for custody of my older brother and I. She lost the case because she falsified child abuse. She'd coached us to lie, but I was too young to fully understand, so I told the truth. After the court case, she was ordered to hand us back over. Instead, she ran. I still remember receiving the phone call. We were at her boathouse, waiting. She said we needed to get our things and flee to the far side of the island. Her boyfriend would be waiting with his boat, to take us away from everything. Being pragmatic, I knew there was a good chance we'd get hungry, so I stuffed my backpack with Twinkies. We made it to the boat, and snuck across state lines into Arizona. We stayed on her boyfriend's ranch, way out in the middle of the desert. It had a table full of Play-Dohs, a wall full of guns, and bees everywhere. My mom would leave for days at a time, trying to find a place for us to go long term. She had no luck. Her boyfriend finally lost patience, and they broke up. My mom packed us up again, and we moved from bad situation to bad situation. I could see the toll it was taking on her. Finally, after 11 months, we returned to her houseboat. It was the only place to go, but the police knew she'd return sooner or later. They'd instructed the neighbors to call if they saw her. Within hours, several police cars showed up. My mom was hauled off to jail, and my brother and I were moved into foster care. The courts investigated my mother's claims of child abuse, which took several months. Life in foster care is terrifying, humiliating, and degrading. I won't get into the nightmares or the abuse you witness. People who've been know. For the rest, it's probably better you don't. Needless to say, I was immensely relieved when we finally returned to my father. He was a stern disciplinarian, but he backed off some after that experience. How did all this affect me long term? I just turned 40. I have never really put down roots, and could be ready to flee my home in less than 20 minutes. I could leave it all, because living on the move taught me how little possessions matter. This has made forming relationships harder, and I've moved around a lot. Only in the last few years have I finally started to put down roots, and I still fight the urge to run sometimes. What happened to your mother afterwards? She went to jail, and my father moved us from Arizona to New Hampshire. We received a few phone calls, but after about 6 months lost touch with her. I didn't hear from her again until I was 28. She hired a private detective to track my brother and I down. She lived in Seattle, and I flew up to see her quite a few times. She passed from lupus a few years later, but I'm still grateful we had the chance to reconnect. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.